Now, let's talk about something that, frankly, too many people underestimate: the role of external pressure and environment in forcing ourselves to take action. And I don't use that word, forcing, lightly, because let's be honest, if willpower alone were enough, most people wouldn't be stuck in the very patterns they hate. They already know what to do. They know they should start that business, write that book, go to the gym, end that toxic relationship. But they don't. Not because the knowledge is missing, but because the psychological infrastructure that supports action, the conditions, the incentives, the expectations, are either absent or actively working against them. Napoleon Hill understood this deeply. That's why in Think and Grow Rich, he emphasized the power of the mastermind group, a collective of like-minded individuals committed to growth. And not just committed in theory, but in practice. Because here's the truth: left to your own devices, with no one watching, no one holding you to your word, and no structure reinforcing your goals, it becomes far too easy to drift, to rationalize, to delay. We're extraordinarily gifted at self-deception, we'll call it. Thinking it through, waiting for the right time. But it's just another form of inertia dressed up in intellectual clothing. There's a psychological principle at work here that deserves a moment of reflection. It's the idea that we calibrate our behavior based on what our social circle expects of us. You take a person who's lazy, unmotivated, and completely undisciplined, and drop them into a group where high performance is the norm, where mediocrity is not only frowned upon, but completely rejected. And suddenly, that same person begins to change. Not because they magically developed internal drive, but because the external context demanded it. The environment pulled them upward. They were forced to rise or leave. And for most people, that kind of external accountability is not just helpful, it's essential. You might say, but shouldn't motivation come from within? Yes, ideally. But in practice, internal motivation is fragile. It fluctuates with mood, fatigue, and doubt. What doesn't fluctuate as easily is social pressure. There's something very primal about being part of a tribe, being seen, being expected to show up. We are social creatures. And when you deliberately engineer your environment to expect your success, to treat your failure to act as unacceptable, you're placing a kind of productive pressure on yourself that bypasses the excuses. So how do you do this in a practical sense? First, build systems of accountability. Tell someone you respect what you're trying to achieve, not just any person. Someone whose opinion matters to you, someone you don't want to disappoint. Better yet, commit publicly. Post it. Announce a deadline. Schedule the event, pre-commit to the consequence. That's when the magic happens, because you've now introduced a level of urgency that didn't exist before. You've raised the stakes. And second, you have to curate your environment ruthlessly. Cut out the low-value noise, disengage from people who normalize underperformance. This isn't about arrogance or judgment, it's about survival. It's about aligning yourself with people and settings that reinforce the identity you're trying to step into. If you're constantly surrounded by cynics, or those who mock ambition, or people who unconsciously encourage comfort over growth, you're at war with your own progress. You're not lazy, you're outnumbered. Hill wasn't merely advocating for teamwork when he spoke about the mastermind. He was speaking about the magnification of intention. When two or more minds court a single goal, something exponential happens. Ideas multiply. Energy compounds. There's a shared momentum that begins to form. A current that carries you even when your own energy wanes. And crucially, it becomes harder to retreat. Why? Because retreat would be witnessed. It would be felt by the group. You'd have to look people in the eye and admit you gave up. And that, more often than not, is enough to keep you moving forward. Jordan Peterson often talks about the necessity of voluntary responsibility. The idea that we need something meaningful to carry or we deteriorate. I would add to that, we need others to see us carrying it. Because when people see you as capable, as someone destined to produce something of value, that gaze becomes both a mirror and a compass. It reflects who you can become and keeps you pointed toward it, even when you're tired or scared or overwhelmed. If you want to force yourself to take action, stop relying solely on your internal resources. Use the outside world. Turn it into an ally, not an obstacle. Build pressure on purpose. Create stakes. Invite people into your process who won't let you quit. Align your environment so that action isn't just likely, it's inevitable. And here's the final truth: discipline doesn't thrive in isolation. It grows in the soil of structure, accountability, and expectation. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So build systems that force you to rise. And don't wait, because the longer you delay, the more deeply you wire the habit of hesitation into your identity. Take one bold step. Today, that puts your reputation, your comfort, or your pride on the line. You'll be amazed at what pressure can do when you harness it rather than hide from it. Because the life you want is waiting on the other side of the version of you that does what's hard. Especially when no one else would dare to.